So, hello again. It's lovely to welcome you this evening. I am about to start our first set of slides, which are entitled Our Firemen. So I hope you enjoy them. Fire, says the old adage, is a good servant, but a bad master. And the establishment of the fire brigade in all our great cities is society's testimony to the truth of that saying. But for the exertions of the brave fellows who work on our fire engines and fire escapes, what wholesale destruction of life and property would now and again occur, when once the devouring flames had got a hold of our city streets? London had such an experience in the Great Fire of 1666, when the greater part of her houses were reduced to heaps of ashes. And similar disasters have occurred in our times to some of the great cities of the United States of America. No wonder, then, that we all have a hearty respect and admiration for the brave firemen who so pluckily risk life and limb in the service of their community. What a stirring sight it is to see the fire engine on its way to fight a fire. How the horses tear along at the top of their speed, as if they know the value of every moment in this contest with the dreaded enemy. How lustily the firemen shout, and how the traffic gives way to the rushing engine through even the most crowded of thoroughfares. But indeed, speed is the utmost importance in the cases of a fire. And it is a most interesting experience to visit a modern fire station. The headquarters, for instance, of the London Fire Brigade in Southwark Bridge Road, and witness the machine-like accuracy and speed with which all duties are carried on by horses as well as men. And the engines turned out, steam up and ready for work 25 seconds after the ringing of the first bell. The Metropolitan Fire Brigade, seen here, whose steam engines are shown in this picture, was established in 1866. Up until 1833, London had no further protection from fire than was afforded by the parish fire engine, which was often left in the hands of some feeble and infirm old man. In that year, the fire insurance companies combined to form the London Fire Establishment. But the brigade, as a public institution, was organised in the year mentioned, 1866, 200 years after the Great Fire. Since that date, its strength and appliances have more than quadrupled, and under the fostering of the London County Council, stations have been scattered all over the vast area, extending east and west from Bow through to Chiswick, and north and south from Hampstead to the Crystal Palace. It is splendidly equipped with a large force of engines and fire escapes, has 41 miles of hose, quite a fleet of river fire engines, and nearly 1,000 men and officers. The men, by the by, with scarcely an exception, have had a previous training in the Royal Navy, the discipline and duties of a life aboard ship perfectly fitting them for the work they are called to undertake. The most famous London fire during recent years was undoubtedly that of Jewin Street, of which we have a graphical illustration on our screen. This fire broke out on the afternoon of Friday, November the 19th, 1897, and spread with alarming rapidity through 6 or 7 streets, completely gutting the houses over many acres of ground, and destroying property to the value of nearly £1,000 sterling. Some 300 were houses, warehouses chiefly devoted to the feather trade and to light fancy goods, were burnt to the ground, and the old city church of St. Giles's Cripplegate, where Cromwell was married and Fox and Milton buried, narrowly escaped destruction. This church also escaped the fire of 1866, and indeed dates from the time of Sir William Rufus. The terrible havoc that is wrought by a great fire is well shown in this photograph of the ruins of a great clothing factory in Whitechapel, which was burnt down a few months ago. The picture was taken soon after the flames had been extinguished, and whilst the firemen were still playing upon the debris. You have here the remains of a great 5-floored building, where only a few hours earlier, hundreds of people had been employed. Iron columns and girders, great charred timbers, piles of confused brickwork and fragments of machinery are intermingled in one common wreck. Fortunately, the fire broke out after the workpeople had left the building, so life was not endangered, though some of the firemen had narrow escapes, whilst enormous damage was done to the property. Another historic fire in recent history was that of Tooley Street in the year of our Lord 1861. At this fire, Mr. Braidwood, the then superintendent of the brigade, lost his life, being buried under a falling wall. Some 1/4 mile of wharves and warehouses were destroyed, and whilst the conflagration was at its height, it probably exceeded as lurid, as terrifying a spectacle as even that great fire of 1666. Thousands upon thousands of people looked on from London Bridge and other points of vantage. The river itself seemed literally on fire, for streams of blazing tallow and tar flowed from the burning warehouses and were carried along by the tide, setting fire to shipping in their progress. The ruins extended back from the river to a depth of 300 yards, and from £2,000 to £3,000 worth of property were destroyed. The strength of the fire brigade at this time was only 120 men, and no doubt the terrible lesson of Tooley Street had a great influence in leading to the brigade's extension and reorganisation some 5 years later. The first object, so it is written, of a fireman is to save life, the saving of property of secondary importance, and the fire escape is a most important aid in this work. Hence, every effort is made to post fire escapes in public thoroughfares, whence they may be dispatched with the least possible delay to the burning building. An example is shown here. Our picture was taken at the headquarters of the brigade, and shows the method adopted by the firemen in rescuing persons from a fire and conveying them down a ladder. This and all other duties connected with their work is subject of careful drill, and a realistic and most interesting display of their methods of work is given by the brigade weekly on Wednesday evenings, to which the public are admitted. This display, says the writer, is well worth witnessing. The fireman's pluck and devotion to duty was well illustrated in the incident which forms the subject of our final picture. A house was ablaze. Its inmates had been rescued. The unconscious, half-suffocated mother and her baby and a group of terrified, half-dressed children. "Are they all in here?" asks one of the firemen. And then, with the roof almost about to fall in, an answer comes from the house itself. A loud, piercing cry, followed by a moan. It is a dog howling, and the fireman knows that there must be some reason for the dog staying in the burning house. And regardless of the cry, the roof will fall in on you. You can never come out of that furnace alive. He dashes in to the rescue. He makes his way through flame and smoke, and with only the dog's cries to guide him, at length gains a small bedroom, which the fire has only just reached. And there he finds a child on the bed, asleep and unharmed, and the good dog who would not desert it, moaning and crying by his bedside. Slowly and at great pain, the fireman with the rescued infant makes his way back out again, closely followed by the faithful dog, to be greeted by a great cheer from the crowd standing around, whilst the child is received into the willing, outstretched arms of one of the neighbours. As for the dog, he finds a warm welcome at the fire station, and becomes the comrade of the men who so bravely carry on the work of the London Metropolitan Fire Brigade. So that was our first set of slides, as I say, entitled Our Firemen. The script was written in about 1898, and I think you'll agree is quite fun. I try, when I can, to give it in this rather Pathé News style voice, because I think that fits. However, I just love the fact that these slides will have been shown to so many different people and in so many different circumstances, and for many of them, it will be perhaps the nearest they ever came, well, to going to London, if nothing else. I think it's really quite fun to watch. Our second set of slides this evening is a story with which I'm sure you'll be familiar. It's the story of Dick Whittington. And so, without any further ado, I will introduce you to London's youngest mayor. Here we have a picture of the orphan Dick Whittington on his way to London City, where he has heard the streets are paved with gold, and where he hopes rapidly to accumulate a large fortune. In early morning, he shoulders all his little belongings and starts full of the highest expectations. But London was oh so different to what he had pictured it. The streets were hard and rough. The people were busy or cross. He has been tramping around the place all day and can find nothing to do. Exhausted, he sits down on a doorstep to rest and speedily falls asleep. The cook has seen him, however, and comes to the door to soundly rate him for his impudence, when at the same minute up came the gentleman of the house, who, taking pity on poor Dick's condition, ordered her to take him into the kitchen and endeavour to find him some sort of employment in the house. From the very first, however, Cook disliked our friend Dick, and he left no means unventured to vent her spite and anger upon the unhappy boy. One day, he let a joint get a little burnt in the oven, and she cuffed him about in a most unmerciful manner, till he felt his life was a perfect misery. One day, while in the street, he happened to meet a girl who, I must say, in this picture looks like an old witch. However, a girl is what it says, who had a cat that she was going to drown in order to get rid of. Dick was touched by compassion and offered her all the money he had, which in reality was only 1 penny, if she would sell him the cat. This she readily did, and he took the cat home. The room in which Dick slept was a little garret, right up at the very top of the house. It was infested with rats. They used to run about the room and over the bed night after night, much to the horror and annoyance of the boy. Now, however, Pussy improved matters, and after she had been in the room no more than 2 or 3 nights, the rats were seen no more. Now, it just so happened that the merchant of the house used once every year to fit out a large vessel with various goods. This he used to send to trade in foreign parts, and he always allowed his servants to send out any goods they chose at the same time. excuse me, when he asked Dick if he would like to choose and speculate in sending anything, Dick thought of his cat. That, after all, was his only possession. And sorry as he was to part with his pussy, yet he determined to let her go, to see if she would bring him any sort of luck. The merchant could hardly restrain a smile when Dick walked in with his cat, but as he did not suppose it would be of any service, yet still he allowed the cat to go. The cat was therefore entered onto the list of ship's cargo. It was with a very heavy heart, one morning the next week, that Dick went down to the wharf with his cat, packed in a neat, comfortable basket, and handed it over to the captain. He begged the captain to take great care of it. Then the ship sailed, and Dick went back with tears in his eyes. You'll note, by the way, how very Tudor all of these pictures look. It's an ever so Victorian way of drawing things. It takes quite a while to get used to, I find. To Dick, life seemed now harder than ever to bear. His only friend was gone, and the irate cook got more vinegary than ever. She knocked poor Dick about in the most shameful manner, so much that one morning he ran away, and determined never to go into the house again. So he set off into the country. After he had walked some miles, however, he sat down to rest, and while sitting there in despondence and misery, he heard the bells of Bow Church ringing. He started up. What was it they were saying? It seemed to him that they were saying, "Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London." And so, impressed with what he heard, he shouldered his bundle, retraced his steps, and went back again to the merchant's house. Meanwhile, the good ship had arrived in foreign waters, and was cruising about from one island to another, selling here, bartering there, and so on. At one large island, where they stopped, the place was infested with rats, and nothing that the natives could do was of any use in getting rid of them. The rats even used to sit on the king's table and devour the food before his very eyes. The captain immediately thought of Dick's cat, and sent off one of the sailors to fetch it and bring it ashore. The cat was bought, and no sooner was the basket opened than Pussy sprang out upon the rats, who rushed away as hard as they could go. They had never seen a cat on the island before, and everyone looked upon it as some sort of wonderful charm. The king offered fabulous sums of money if the captain would only let him have the cat. Directly the captain saw how eager the king was, he declared he could not possibly let him have the animal. It was worth more than all of his ship put together. In the end, the king offered many thousands of pounds, and the bargain was reached. Let us consider for a moment poor Dick's utter amazement when one day the merchant called him into his room. Heaps of gold were there upon the table, and in strong iron boxes on the floor. They were pointing, each and every one of them. Sorry, I'll start that sentence again. Let us judge poor Dick's amazement when one day the merchant called him into his room. Oh dear friends, I'm sorry, I seem to have got muddled with my slides. Here we go. This is the one I meant to show you. Apologies. For the third time. Judge poor Dick's amusement when one day the merchant called him into his room. There he found heaps of gold piled upon the table and filling the strong iron boxes on the floor. The master pointed to the table, saying, "This money is all yours. It is what has been paid as the price of your cat. Allow me to congratulate you on having raised more money than I myself have made on this voyage. All of a sudden, Dick had become at once a rich, fine gentleman, and was no longer the drudge of the house. He wore beautiful clothes, studied various languages, and in a year or two no one could tell the difference between him and a cultured young gentleman. And then he did what he had long wished so to do, but feared he would never be able. He asked his former kind master for his daughter's hand in marriage. He had long loved her in secret, and she herself had been much in the young fellow to admire. And when her father found that they were both of one mind on the subject, he simply joined their hands together and said, "Bless you, my children, heaven bless you." And now Dick's fame was soon made. From one distinguished position he passed to another, till at last the citizens of London chose him as their Lord Mayor. Here he so well filled the office that he was 3 times elected to it. His wealth and generosity were known the whole country through, and the king was so struck by his conduct that he knighted him, Sir Richard Whittington. And that, friends, is where we leave our friend. Goodbye. That is the end of our story.